You picture the velvet rope, the packed floor, the bottle sparklers, the line stretching around the block on a Saturday night. That's the fantasy. Here's the real number underneath it. The average nightclub in America keeps less than 5 cents of every dollar it makes. One insurance renewal alone can cost more than most first-time owners save up to open the doors in the first place. And one of the most famous nightclubs to ever exist, a room so legendary it defined an entire decade of nightlife, was raided, gutted by tax charges, and shut down within 3 years of opening. Not because the music was bad, because the numbers were always working against it. Here's what owning a nightclub actually costs. The version nobody puts in the pitch deck. Start with what it takes just to unlock the door. A serious mid-size club, around 10,000 square feet, needs soundproofed walls, reinforced flooring rated for a dancing crowd, and a DJ booth or stage built to fire code. Not because it looks nice, but because inspectors will shut you down if it isn't. That build-out alone runs $300 to $500 per square foot in a major city, which lands you somewhere around $3.5 million before you've bought a single bottle of vodka. Then there's the liquor license, and this is where things get strange. In some states, it's a $12,000 filing fee. In license-capped states like California or New Jersey, the government isn't issuing new licenses at all. You're buying one off another business that's closing, on a private resale market, for $200,000 to $800,000. You're not paying for a permit. You're paying for permission that only exists in limited supply. Add sound and lighting built to actually move a crowd, $250,000. Add security infrastructure, cameras, metal detectors, reinforced entrances, $80,000 more. Add first-year insurance, general liability plus the liquor liability rider every underwriter demands, close to $140,000, due before you've served a single drink. And there's a cost almost nobody accounts for at the start. Architects, engineers, occupancy load calculations, fire marshal sign-off, ADA compliance. That paperwork alone runs $120,000 to $200,000, and while you wait on approval, you're still paying rent on a space that's making you $0. Add staff training, a launch event, and pre-opening marketing, and the real total to open the doors lands around $4.2 million. Nobody puts that number on the investor pitch deck, and that $4.2 million doesn't even include the cost of finding people who can actually run the place. Experienced nightlife management is scarce, and recruiting a general manager, a head of security, and a lead bartender with real bottle service experience often means a signing bonus or a relocation package, easily another $30,000 to $50,000 before opening night even happens. Owners budget for concrete and sound systems. They rarely budget for the fact that the right people cost real money too. Now the part that never stops, the operating cost stack, running whether the room is full or completely empty. Rent in a real nightlife district runs around $40,000 a month, $480,000 a year, because clubs need foot traffic and zoning nobody's neighbors will fight in court. Payroll, bartenders, security, door staff, DJs, promoters, management, comes to roughly $1.1 million a year for a club running 4 nights a week. License renewals and the compliance lawyer who keeps you from losing your liquor license, $60,000 a year. Full insurance once you're actually operating, not pre-opening estimates, around $180,000. Utilities and the maintenance contract for equipment getting hammered every weekend, $90,000. Marketing, promoter fees, and talent booking to keep the room from going quiet, $200,000. Cleaning, repairs, and the property damage that comes standard with a room full of intoxicated people, $60,000 more. And then the cost nobody mentions until they've already lost money to it, card processing fees. Most of a club's revenue moves through card payments now, and processing alone eats 2 to 3% of every transaction. quietly pulling another $70,000 to $90,000 a year out of the business. Total it up, and fixed overhead, before a single drink is poured, sits around $2.17 million a year. There's also the cost of simply staying open on paper, annual accounting, payroll processing, and the legal retainer most owners keep on standby for the inevitable dispute with a vendor, a former employee, or a guest. That runs another $40,000 to $60,000 a year, invisible on any menu but very visible on the tax return. So where does the money actually come from? A club running 4 nights a week, averaging 800 guests a night at $40 a head, across cover, bar sales, and bottle service, brings in around $32,000 a night. Multiply that by 4 nights and 52 weeks and you land on roughly $6.6 million a year in gross revenue. Sounds massive. Watch it shrink. Cost of goods on liquor runs 20 to 22% of bar sales, about $1.4 million. Subtract the $2.17 million in overhead, subtract debt service on that $4.2 million build-out. Call it $420,000 a year at a realistic rate. What's left is roughly $610,000 in profit. On $6.6 million in revenue, that's a margin just above 9%. And that only holds if literally nothing goes wrong for 52 straight weeks. Nothing goes right for 52 straight weeks. Here's the variable that quietly wrecks that margin: the cost of borrowed money itself. Between 1979 and 1981, the Federal Reserve under Paul Volcker pushed interest rates to nearly 20% to crush inflation, the most aggressive rate hiking cycle in modern American history. Nightclubs are almost always financed with variable rate loans because banks treat nightlife as high-risk lending and refuse to lock owners into fixed terms. A club that opened its doors financing debt at reasonable rates could find itself, within 2 years, paying double or triple the interest it originally budgeted for, with no increase in revenue to match. The margin doesn't bend under that pressure. It breaks. And the Volcker shock wasn't a one-time fluke. 4 decades later, between March 2022 and July 2023, the Federal Reserve ran the fastest rate hiking cycle since that era, pushing the federal funds rate from near zero to above 5%. Owners who financed build-outs in 2021 at low, comfortable rates were refinancing at nearly triple the cost within 2 years. Different decade, same trap. Nightlife businesses run on debt, and debt is the one input every projection quietly assumes will never change. Now watch what that pressure actually did to one of the most famous nightclubs on the planet. Studio 54 opened in New York in April 1977 and became an instant cultural phenomenon. Velvet ropes, celebrity guest lists, a room so exclusive it made headlines just for who got turned away. At its peak, it was pulling in cash faster than almost any venue in the country. Then, in December 1978, federal agents raided the club and found garbage bags stuffed with skimmed cash and evidence of massive unreported income. Owners Steve Rubel and Ian Schrager were charged with tax evasion, convicted in 1980, and sentenced to prison. The club's license was pulled. The empire that had defined an entire era of nightlife collapsed in under 3 years, not because the crowd stopped coming, but because the business underneath the party was never built to survive scrutiny. That's the pattern. It wasn't bad management. It was a business model sitting directly inside a regulatory blast radius, one audit away from total collapse, no matter how good the door list looked. Here's a cost that never makes it onto a nightclub's opening projections: liability for what your guests do after they leave. In most states, if a venue overserves someone who then causes harm, a fight, a car accident, a fall down a staircase, the club can be sued directly. Picture one bottle service table on a busy Saturday, 6 guests, 3 bottles, a $4,000 check, about $3,000 of pure profit. Now picture one of those guests leaving overserved and hurting someone an hour later. Average liability settlements for overservice incidents in the United States run from $100,000 to $300,000, and the serious cases, real injury, wrongful death, settle well into seven figures. One profitable table can, months later, generate a legal bill that erases a full year of tables just like it. And it doesn't resolve quickly. It drags through insurers and lawyers for years, quietly draining margin long after the incident is forgotten by everyone except the accountant. Multiply that risk across every table, every night, every year the club stays open, and you start to understand why insurance underwriters treat nightlife as one of the riskiest categories they cover. Riskier, in raw claims data, than most construction trades. There's a second cost rising faster than any other line on the sheet, and this one doesn't take months to destroy a business. It takes minutes. That cost is catastrophic single-event exposure, and the defining case is the Station Nightclub fire in Rhode Island, February 20th, 2003. Pyrotechnics used during a concert ignited flammable foam lining the walls, and in under 6 minutes, 100 people were dead. The lawsuits that followed named the club's owners, the band, the pyrotechnics company, and the foam manufacturer, and settlements across all of it eventually totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. The venue itself didn't survive the night, let alone the litigation. Every nightclub operating today is carrying some version of that same exposure. Overcrowding, a blocked exit, one piece of failing equipment sitting one bad night away from an event no insurance policy and no profit margin can fully absorb. Scale changes some of this math and makes other parts worse. What gets better? Bigger operators negotiate volume liquor pricing, shaving 3 to 5 percentage points off cost of goods. An established brand needs less paid marketing to fill the room, because the room fills itself. What gets harder? Bigger, more famous venues draw more scrutiny from inspectors, competitors, and lawyers. Insurance premiums don't scale down proportionally, because insurers price the worst possible night, not the average one. Staffing complexity multiplies past what a single manager can actually oversee. Brand equity compounds, sure. A club with 10 years of history commands higher prices without spending more to get them. But the underlying risk doesn't shrink with size. It grows with it. At a certain scale, a nightclub stops being a hospitality business. It becomes a real estate and risk management operation that happens to have a DJ booth. That shift is invisible from the dance floor. Guests never see the underwriter's spreadsheet or the compliance officer's checklist. They just see the door, the lights, and the crowd, completely unaware that the bigger and more successful the room gets, the more the entire operation starts to resemble an insurance company that occasionally plays music. Now put two versions of the same year side by side. Optimistic, full houses 4 nights a week, 52 weeks straight, no lawsuits, no suspensions, no equipment failures, low staff turnover. Net profit, roughly $610,000 on $6.6 million in revenue, a 9% margin. Realistic, one overservice lawsuit settles for $180,000. One health code violation triggers a 3-week license suspension, costing roughly $190,000 in lost revenue. One sound system failure on a peak weekend costs $40,000 in emergency repairs and lost bottle service bookings. Recalculate, and that $610,000 profit becomes a net loss of roughly $200,000. The gap between those two scenarios is one lawsuit, one suspension, one equipment failure. None of that is rare. All three happen to someone in this industry every single week. And most owners only budget for the version where none of them happen at all. Industry data puts the failure rate for bars and nightclubs at around 60% within the first 3 years. The cause is almost never bad taste in music. It's debt structure and cash flow. Over-leveraged build-outs paired with reserves too thin to survive one bad month. The clubs that make it past year 5 share 5 specific habits. They keep fixed debt low instead of financing the entire build-out on variable rate loans. They diversify revenue beyond nightly liquor sales through private events and daytime use of the space. They hold a cash reserve equal to 3 to 6 months of fixed costs, specifically to absorb a lawsuit or suspension without missing payroll. They treat compliance and security as a real budget line, not an afterthought, because prevention is always cheaper than the incident it prevents. They negotiate lease terms tied to a percentage of revenue instead of a fixed rent that punishes them in a slow month. None of it is glamorous. All of it is the actual difference between a club still open in year 5 and one that isn't. And almost every single one of these habits gets decided months before opening night, back when the only thing on anyone's mind is the sound system and the guest list, not the spreadsheet quietly determining whether any of it survives contact with a bad month. You pictured the velvet rope, the packed floor, the line around the block. That part was never the lie. The lie is what happens off camera. The $4.2 million build-out. The 9% margin that evaporates in one bad month. The empire that looked untouchable right up until the raid. The real number behind the fantasy isn't the $6.6 million in revenue. It's the 100 people who didn't walk out of a nightclub on a Thursday night in February 2003, and the industry-wide reckoning that followed. A nightclub was never really a hospitality business. It's a leveraged bet against interest rates, liability, and regulation, dressed up in good lighting. The velvet rope was always real. It just wasn't the thing keeping the business alive. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, subscribe for more.